Hi. So you may be thinking, why is she talking about identity again? Is she going through a crisis? And to that, I would say no, no, not a crisis, but identity is intrinsically connected to social belonging, and it's the social belonging aspect really like I want to touch upon. We are living in a globalized world. And so that itself challenges the notion of single fixed cultural identities or single fixed identity, even. And, it becomes a lot more fluid. But before I get into that fluid aspect, I guess this video, I guess it's for people who are brought up who was brought up around different cultural multiple different cultures, or who had to move around a lot as children and or teenagers, or those with even maybe to those with parents with of mixed heritage. Yeah, so back to the fluidity aspect. A lot of people in the world, a lot of people never had to experience movement. They were born in the same place, they were brought up in the same area. Um, yeah, they've, so a lot of these guys have this intrinsic sense of belonging to the place they come from, to the nationality that they have, to the people um, that surround them. Yeah, there's this deep sense of belonging. Of course, I'm talking in general. Um, Even in my own family, I see, especially my the older generation. Um, um, a lot of my cousins back in India. Oh, oh, yeah, back in India, because they were born and brought up in the same place and they're around the same people. Um, they have this really, yeah, they feel connected to the um, to where they're from, and it's really beautiful to see. And I have been jealous of people who've never had to move. I always thought, oh, it must be a wonderful feeling. Yeah, and for me, I am what you call a 1.5 immigrant. So I moved here to England at 11. So it's later on in, my childhood wasn't here. Even though I am fully, I am a fully Malayali by origin. From that age, the kind of environment that I was in, it shaped the way that I developed inside. So, for example, the kind of when we moved, there was nobody for example, in my school, the year above me, the year below me, or even in my own year, there were no other Malayali people, or there was hardly any people of color. Yeah, hardly, maybe one or two, for example, in my year. Um, in my neighborhood, around where I lived, there was a lack of um, um, diaspora. And yeah, the kind of TV show I was, this I'm talking about late 2010, so there was no really social media back then. It wasn't rampant, and so the TV shows that I was watching, I was watching like, British TV shows and American TV shows on TV, the music I was listening to, and also, yeah, like every morning I would be listening to the local radio station. And, you know, so really it was more of the environment that I was surrounded with that had a huge influence on me rather than my own cultural background. And the only time, for example, I feel like I'm a Malayali, for example, is when we have the community events throughout the year, like 3 or 4 times a year, or we see back at home, with my parents. That would be the only time I'd be tapping into that kind of cultural space. But outside of that, I wasn't. And so again, a lot of us who were kind of brought up in that environment, they don't feel like, oh, I'm fully this and I'm not fully that this either, that either. And so yeah, for a lot of us, cultural identities becomes multifaceted and it becomes more nuanced. And because for a long time I've struggled with this sense of belonging, and it made me think about what does it mean by sense of belonging. Like for example, whenever I used to go to Kerala, or even now, my child self is like, it feels nice, but my adult self doesn't feel happy, or not happy, it doesn't feel content, because you realize you've changed so much from when you were a kid. You can't fit in there. Or whenever I'm in, like for example, like in England, there's that sense of, there's a sense of belonging, but at the same time there isn't, because like I still love the tropics. That's where I'm really like, I feel like I flourish. Um, yeah. And I still, yeah. Uh, so you don't feel belonged in a, like, yeah. So finding a space where you feel belonging becomes crucial. Yeah, and that sense of belonging is fundamental in our human life. Um, it it is absolutely necessary to have that sense of belonging, and especially for people who always felt misplaced. um, we do tend to search for what, like that feeling of home, that feeling of, and it is interesting because our forefathers lived a very different life, because they were born in, like, in the same tribe, for example, and you know they were surrounded by the same people, and they never had to navigate complex identities that um, we face. And so for people who does struggle with identity, we'll have to find belonging. It might mean finding a location, finding an actual geographical location where we feel it, or it might be with people that we feel belonging with. It's different for everybody. Um, but I guess social belonging is where you just feel yourself, where you feel accepted for who you are. Um, yeah. So, you know, and it might be out of your cultural um space you're born into, or it might be out of you might, like, you can't define social belonging by culture, or you can't define it by nationality either. I guess for a lot of us, belonging is defined by how we feel inside in here, with the people around us. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for watching the video.